Hello, I'm James Thurman, and I've been teaching metalsmithing and jewelry making for over 20 years. Over that time, I've collected many handouts and resources from a wide range of different sources. I started assembling them under broad topics to become my ultimate resources collection for use by students and teachers alike. If you have some great handouts or other sources that I should add, definitely email me. I've created this short video overview of one of my compilations to help share these resources with a larger audience. I won't go into detail about each one, but just share some of the reasons why I found it helpful. Feel free to go to my website, jamesthurman.com, and download the PDF from my resources page if you like. This compilation focuses on threading, which is a way of cold joining parts together, nuts and bolts, and things like that. I started adding a bibliography to these compilations just because many people were wondering the specific sources. Some seemed familiar, but others weren't sure. And I've just decided to organize the PDF in alphabetical order of the bibliography, in case you were wondering about that. I wouldn't introduce these in this order. I'd often start with Timocrite's Complete Metalsmith or something like that for beginning students. Putting this compilation together was prompted by me recently teaching a workshop on micro hardware and working with jewelers on particular kinds of threading and things like that. It is something I use in my own work a lot and something that I really enjoy doing. And I think I got hooked on it when I went to night school to be trained as a machinist before I went to grad school. So it's been something I've been doing and enjoying for decades. So I think you could tell from the size of this PDF that it's something that I'm really familiar with. With this book, this wouldn't necessarily be a resource that you might expect to find something about tap and die and threading, but there is a nice section in it, so I've included some resources here from it. Gets into a good basic discussion or introduction of it. Some good reference charts. I like the photo layout of the different tools that might be involved in the process. And really describes how you're going to do that by hand. So some nice details on that. This is kind of an older shop, maybe textbook or reference materials that has both projects as well as explanations of how to do things. So this is maybe similar to that previous silversmithing book, but goes into how you're actually going to use a tap or a die to cut threads. Has a good visual explanation of the threads and some of the differences. Of course, I'm a sucker for these kind of older illustration images as well. A nice labeling of the different parts. It always is helpful to get that basic vocabulary down so that you can instruct, or if you're a student, ask questions about something you're not clear on. This is another sort of older reference. I do have a collection of maybe retro books that sometimes I'll pull from. Just a nice, succinct illustration and explanation of it. Probably any one of these excerpts from the books would be sufficient, but different people have different uses and preferences, so I figured why not just collect them all and put them all together. And I've scanned a lot of sections out of this book, which functions as a textbook for kind of Swiss trained goldsmith apprentices. And so this gets a little bit more focused on the jewelry side of things. some suggested exercises and guidelines. Now, of course, since this is European, it'll be in metric. Some great visual possibilities for designs. And we get into Timocrite's series of things. There's going to be slight differences here based on what you might be using the threading principles for. In this case, obviously, with containers, small containers, boxes, and lockets. And some slightly different, they kind of relate with screw closures of small containers. So it's not exactly threading, but it does relate. So I figured since it's in that section, might as well include it. And you can hand make single threads or mating threads, and he goes into that process. Again, since it's focusing more on metalsmithing, a bit different from the other resources. Here's the most succinct one-page encapsulation if you're just looking for a basic handout. And this is a favorite book of mine of Tim's that obviously, since I use a lot of cold joinery in my own work, and so this gets into a little bit more specifics as you might use it for jewelry. Basic explanation, reference charts, and some great little tips on how you might use them specifically within jewelry. And then even specifics into how you might do threaded parts with metal clay. And this is a technical article that Pat Nelson put together for SNAG, the Society of North American Goldsmiths. And I thought this was another kind of good multi-page reference. Some great how-to with great illustrated photos. And some good sources for parts and materials. So I apologize I couldn't get this scan a bit flatter, but this is from my old machinist textbook, so it's quite a thick book and tough to get really flat there to get those scanned images. But I think it's legible enough, and this is probably the largest excerpt. But again, it's from a textbook, and I thought if anybody really wants to get into it, this will cover every little detail you might ever want. So we'll just go through this pretty quickly. A little history. Diagram of the parts of threads. The anatomy of a tap and how it's working. Also important, a really great illustration of the chips that are coming off while the tap is cutting, and keeping that in mind while and that's especially important when you're starting to work very small scale for like mini or micro hardware. Some tips on if your tap does break, how to extract it. Little vocab review. And you can even take a quiz if you want. And this is then the next unit in that same textbook. And so this gets into external threading. So taps are cutting internal threads, and then dies are used to cut external threads. And kind of goes through the same format as the previous unit. And again, gets into, things go wrong and how you might extract broken parts. Always helpful. And again, a little bit of vocabulary. And a quiz if you want to take one. Here's another one from the my archive of sort of maybe retro or vintage reference materials. All the principles are still relevant, and we kind of use all the same tools and still use the same processes. I'm also a sucker for illustrations like this. I love the step-by-step that it goes through. Talks a little bit about factory-made fasteners as well. And back into some more specifics on the jewelry side of things. Again, I apologize for the slight warping, but this book's a really thick one, so it's tough to get a flat scan of any of the pages. And again, this is more focused, obviously, on jewelry applications for threaded connections. I love some of the other examples of how they might be applied within pieces. And here's a handout from a compilation of handouts. Just some great hand-drawn illustrations from Fred Roll, how it might be used in a jewelry piece. And that's the full compilation. So again, feel free to go to my website, jamesthurman.com, my resources page, and download the PDF if you like. And certainly, I don't know if there's much more to add on the topic of threading, but if you have some great handouts, certainly email me and share those, and I can get them added in. So enjoy and let me know what you think. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you can hear from me when I post future videos. Thanks for stopping by.